In today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement, we're talking the one big beautiful bill. And this has been a hot topic here lately. There's a lot of things going on in here, and I'm going to talk about the 14 points that apply to those who are in or near retirement that could be helpful for our audience who watches this Joe Knows Retirement podcast. And so if you are in or near retirement, you're that Midwestern millionaire, you're hardworking, you're a diligent saver, you're frugal, you probably are in that 2% club, you have a pension, you have $1 million or more saved up. If that's you, this video is for you. We're going to tailor it down to you. And also, if you like our content, you maybe watched a few times, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. We keep content like this coming for people just like you. And put in the comments, what do you think about this? What more questions do you have on the one big beautiful bill that we can add clarity to? Because we've dove into all 900 pages in this thing, and we want to make sure you have the clarity that you're looking for. So comment below what other questions, what clarity you have on this, and we'll do our best to get you the answer there as we move along. And so that's what's in store for today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
So the first point we want to focus on with the one big beautiful bill is these tax rates. Again, you've heard this before, but they're going to continue to be lower. Now, they're permanent. Does that mean they'll be permanent forever? No, it just means they'll be permanent until potentially someone tries to change it. Although there's going to be more requirements to change it, which is certainly good for us taxpayers that we're going to be paying lesser. And so we all know that in 2017, President Trump enacted the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which reduced taxes for a limited time from 2017 to 2026. We knew that was supposed to expire here next year, and we have been planning for that for the last, since 2017 for taking advantage of that tax sale. Well, the good news is this tax sale has moved along, and we're going to be able to take advantage of it as it goes along. And I'll give you a hint, it's even gotten better. There's some benefits here that are even extra that we can start to take advantage of. And as I always say, I wrote the book called I Hate Taxes, and I always say I want to pay my fair share and not a penny more. And so when the tax code gives us opportunities, when the tax code gives us loopholes, we have to take advantage of that. If we don't take advantage of it, we're leaving money on the table. And I don't know about you, but I've never donated any money to the IRS above what my tax bill is. And so because of that, I want to find as much ways as I can save money as possible. And so I'm sure that's you as well, and that's why you're still watching this video. And so we're going to break down some of the more of these tax benefits that you can see with the one big beautiful bill here. The second thing I want to break down is the standard deduction. I don't know if anyone really expected this to happen, but the standard deduction is getting an increase including in this year in 2025. Typically, they increase it after the year or for the next year, but not typically during the year for that year. And so we're going to see an extra bump. So for a single filer, it's $15,750. For married, it's $31,500. So slight adjustment there, but still, any tax benefit's better than nothing. And then the third thing that is going on with this one big beautiful bill is the bonus deduction. Now, this is one that we've gotten a lot of questions on, and this is only applicable to those who are 65, and this is only applicable for this year, which again, that's this year, so you can take advantage of this for this year. So make sure you're adjusting your tax plans accordingly. So a lot of our clients, we've met them earlier in the year. We're making sure we adjust, and now at this point, we're reaching out to all of our clients and adjusting for all these changes in the one big beautiful bill to be proactive and plan for year end. And so that is going to be good until now, until 2028. So only a limited period of time. So if you're, under 60 years old, you're not going to be able to take advantage of this. But for any senior 65 or older, this is going to be a great opportunity to take advantage of. The other thing I want to mention is that if you're a married couple, that's $6,000 per taxpayer. It's also in addition to the other 65 or over deduction that we're seeing currently. If you're single, you can deduct $2,000. If you're married filing jointly, then you can deduct up to $1,600 each or $3,200. And so because of that, you get an extra bump in your savings there. And also understand this $6,000, we've gotten this question, it's if you itemize or not. And so anyone can get that $6,000, which is a great benefit to have. And so if you're a single filer, with all those benefits, the standard deduction, the $2,000 you're already getting, the $6,000 on top, the bonus deduction if you're 65 or older, your deduction is going to be $23,750. So your first $23,000 of income, that's tax-free. You don't have to pay any additional tax on that. That's a great benefit to have. And if you're married, it's now up to $46,700. And so we didn't expect that to happen. This is a huge benefit for those 65 or older. And you probably remember Trump saying, hey, let's get Social Security tax-free. Well, this is a way that 90% of the taxpayers is what they propose are not going to pay Social Security. And from what I know, it's not going to pay tax on Social Security. And from what I know and from the research I've done, that is a true stat. And so if you think about the numbers, already about half the people don't pay any tax on their Social Security because their incomes are so low. As a country, there's a lot of people that pay $0 in taxes every single year, and it's about half. And so a lot of people don't understand that. And so with this being $46,700, that's going to leave a lot of room for Social Security to be tax-free. And so because of that, that's going to be a great benefit to have. Now, with our clients, the 2% club, pensions, higher income, million plus, diligent savers, they're probably going to be, still hitting that Social Security tax torpedo we always talk about, where they're still paying tax on Social Security. But this is definitely going to allow them to potentially not have to pay the full amount of tax on Social Security. And so something to really be excited about if you're retired, have a pension, $1 million saved there. And also understand that, this is probably not going to be a concern for a lot of our clients, even though they have pensions and higher incomes in retirement. But it could be something to be aware of if you're looking at doing strategies like a Roth conversion right now. And the reason why is because of the income phase outs with this. So we have to understand how this phase out works. So if you are single, if you make between $75,000 and $175,000, you're going to see your benefits start to reduce. Once you make over $175,000, you are no longer going to get that $6,000 benefit. So this is not put in place for the wealthy. This is put in place for the middle class and lower class is ultimately the idea. And so the other thing to think about, if you're married, it's $150,000 to $250,000. So the reason why we say this isn't an issue for some of our clients, because think about it. If you're retired, then your pension, even if you have a six-figure pension, $100,000, even if your Social Security as a joint couple equals $100,000, you're still at $200,000. And, if you have $1 million, that's RMD, maybe if you're even 73, that's going to be a $40,000 around that. So you're still under the $250,000. Now, if you have, 3, 4, 5 million, you're 73 or above right now, and you're taking RMDs, well, you are probably going to be, out of this phase out. But, just depends on your situation. But if you're 65 to 73, you haven't started RMDs, you probably are still going to get this phase out. But it starts to become more of a question for those who, maybe you're working. If you're working at 65 or older and you're making a really high income, and, that could be a thing to also look at. But, if you're not taking your pension yet, maybe you're still good. So here's where I really want to pay attention to, though. If you're looking to do Roth conversions 65 or older, a lot of people are thinking, hey, that 24% bracket, that 22% bracket, I want to take advantage of that. Well, here's the deal. There's no more 22% bracket. So if you look at the screen here, this is a picture that our tax software spit out to help you get a perspective of what this looks like. And so as you see, that 22% bracket, that blue, basically any dollar you go into that, you're starting to phase out of this $6,000 deduction, which is about an extra 2.6% tax is how that plays out, which basically means you're doing Roth conversions in the 24% bracket. So you have to ask yourself, is it going to be worthwhile for you to do conversions past this $150,000 if you're married, as an example, to lose this deduction? And I would argue sometimes it can make sense because of the long-term gain you can get from this, but also sometimes that may be a higher rate than what you can expect to pay in the future. So you really have to do your math. You have to look at this for your specific situation, but this definitely will play a part in your Roth conversion strategy if you are 65 or older. I'm going to do some more videos coming up on this concept, so pay attention to that. We'll dive deeper into this. And now the fourth point I want to talk about is charitable donations. Now this is something that's coming back. And so for many of you who have not been significant donors, you haven't been given, $5,000, $10,000 or more a year, you may have seen zero tax benefits because you may have just been taking the standard deduction. And now with the standard deduction getting raised even higher, that would even probably limit more people from donating. And there's even stats to show that less people are donating when there's no tax benefits associated with that. So now, if you're a single taxpayer, you can give $1,000 and basically write that off above the line deduction. So if you take the standard deduction, you can still write that off as an additional $1,000 benefit. And if you're married, that number is $2,000. And this is only in place until 2028. You can take advantage of that this year. And so this is something you're going to want to make sure you're paying attention to. A lot of our clients are very generous. Some of them are, just giving a few $1,000s. And so we're always going to make sure they are paying attention to this. So make sure you're saving receipts, making sure you're planning for this so you can take advantage of the extra tax savings. Because as always we say, you shouldn't give just because of tax benefits. But if you are going to give, make sure you get your tax benefits. So this is a great way to benefit from that. The fifth point we want to point out in the One Big Beautiful Bill is Trump accounts. Now, this may not necessarily go directly with our clients near retirement. I don't think they're going to be born here in 2025 to 2028, but they may have some grandkids that are going to be born, and you're going to want to help them out. So this is something you're probably going to want to know about. And this is interesting. So the government's basically giving them $1,000 to put towards an account that will grow basically tax deferred, and then it can be taken out. It will be taxed as capital gains at that point for certain things, such as maybe going to college, or maybe a house, or maybe they have a baby, or maybe they want to start a business. So it's a productive way to give them some opportunity to do something with that. And if that compounds and grows over time, it's, they're saying it has to be invested in an equity type investment. This could be a large value that they're able to get when they graduate college or when they graduate high school after 18 to really be put to use towards something that's going to be productive for them. So we're recommending everyone that has is having a child born in 2025 to 2028 to look into this. I'm reading that you can't open this and start contributing until January 1st of 2026. Here's the other thing that we're hearing is that you can contribute $5,000 a year. Also, your employer could contribute $2,500 a year. So that's something maybe you tell your children to maybe see if their employer will offer that for them. And then the thing that we want everyone to understand with this, though, is that we don't really recommend anyone contribute to this, is what we're thinking right now. The reason why is, get that free $1,000 if you're able to. But the reason why we're not recommending it is because it has to pay capital gains. And so we'd rather see someone contribute to a 529 where they could get it tax-free for education, which in the One Big Beautiful Bill allows more donations or allows more capability for that 529 to use for more purposes. You can use it for secondary school. You can use it for even credentials is something that's interested. So if they want to become a financial planner, they could use it towards their Series 65 or CFP is something that we're hearing there, or maybe a CPA, which is it's just interesting. And that's a way that they could use it even beyond if they don't go to college in other ways. And so that's something to pay attention to. Also, they can move $35,000 to a Roth IRA eventually from that 529. And so that's something else that can be very valuable, and why we would recommend that, because that's tax-free versus capital gains in the one in the Trump account, or even in UTMA could cause some more flexibility if they want to take it out, and they could also get the benefits on the taxes on that as well that may be more beneficial than the Trump accounts there. So just pay attention to that depending on what you're looking to do. And a lot of our clients want to give and gift to their grandkids, and so make sure you're doing so in the productive, fruitful way that is most endeared to what you're looking to do. All right, point 6 and 7 here are deductions on tips and overtime. So let's start with tips here. So on tips, you can donate or you can write off $25,000. Now, this is an interesting one because it's married and single. So if you're single, you can write out $25,000. If you're married, both of you are getting tips. Well, you can only do $25,000 combined. Now, for the deduction on overtime, that one is going to be $12,500 per taxpayer. So same amount, but it's per taxpayer if you're married. And so, both of you would have to get overtime up to that amount. And also the thing to understand with this, there is a phase out. So if you're single, $150,000. If you're married filing jointly, it's $300,000. And then, if you're single, starting at $175,000. If you're married at $350,000 is when you're fully phased out of that. So anything over that, you're not going to be able to take advantage of this. Obviously, most people who are working are probably going to be under those income amounts that we see, those with pensions, that 2% club. And so this should be something they're able to take advantage of. Be on the lookout for more information on this of how to take advantage of, but you're going to want to keep really good records on this. But definitely a great benefit that I see. Values hard work, values people doing the right things, and that's something that as a country that we all typically support of, at least I do. The 7th point about the One Big Beautiful Bill is the SALT deduction. Now, this one may not impact everyone, but can be very beneficial for those that it can impact. And it's more going to impact those who are in states with higher state tax local tax, property tax is going to play a factor here. Those who are going to be more charitable, those who are going to have more write-offs and itemizer deductions, this is one that's really going to help them. So it's been capped at a $10,000 limit. They're now raising it to $40,000. And so if you have $40,000 of state, local, and all those deductions we talked about, then you can write that fully off and itemize your deductions with that. And so this is going to be really beneficial. And it's the phase out's only up to $500,000. So most of the clients we see aren't making $500,000 or more. It's a pretty steep drop off from $500,000 to $600,000. So if you're making over $600,000, then you're going to have no deduction. It's going to go down to $10,000. Is something to pay attention to. And the other thing to pay attention to with this is this is going to revert in 2029. And so after that, it's going to go back to the 10,000 is what we're slated for. And so if you are looking at doing Roth conversions, most of our clients aren't doing Roth conversions up to 500,000, but keep in mind, if you're in California, New York, or other states, like many of our other clients are, you have to pay a large amount of state taxes anytime you convert. If your state taxes are 10%, let's as an easy example, when you convert 100,000, that's $10,000 of state taxes you have to pay, but that's going to be able to count towards this limit here. And so that's something we're paying attention to for those clients, especially those who are more charitable, because if they're already given, $30,000 a year or $20,000 a year, well, anything on top of that is probably going to be able to get them over that standard deduction, especially if they're under 65. They're not going to get that bonus deduction that we talked about earlier. So just something to pay attention to if that's you. So lots of strategies behind this one as well. And so I think the SALT deduction was point number 8. So our editor will help me there. But for point number 9 is the SGO. And so this is a scholarship granting organization. Now, this will not start until 2027, but I'm so excited about it. I had to share about it today. This is the ability for you to give $1,700 to a private school, and K through 12, support education, and you get that money right back on your federal taxes. So if your tax bill is $1,700, you basically have a zero tax burden if you gave the $1,700. So you're not necessarily getting any benefit out of this necessarily. You're just not losing any money. So you give $1,700 here, you get it right back on your tax return is basically how it works. Keep in mind, non-refundable. So anything, if you're not having to pay any taxes at all, you're under a standard deduction and you give $1,700, well, you're not going to be able to get that back. It's only going to count as a donation at that point. Understand, right now, it looks like it's going to be $1,700 per taxpayer. So if you're married filing jointly, a great way to give to organizations that are dear to your heart and be able to support those around you. Here in Columbus, Ohio, we have one called the Ohio Christian Education Network Scholarship Granting Organization, OSIN SGO. And we talk about this quite a bit. I actually talked about it in my book, I Hate Taxes. And here in the state of Ohio, we can actually get a $750 state tax deduction by doing this right now. And so if you're watching this in Ohio, I know, 95% of our clients come to us all across the country. But if you're here locally in Ohio and you're a neighbor of ours, make sure this is something you're looking at taking advantage of. And this is something that you can do $750 per spouse, and check your state where you're at to see your benefits of what this looks like for you. But basically you can get that right back on your state taxes. And so this would be the case where you could give $750 there. You could also give $1,700 here to get the federal benefit in 2027. So you could get both benefits depending on what your state says there. So big benefit we get really excited about. I personally love supporting Christian education. I went to a private Christian university and played basketball. It's called Mount Vernon Nazarene University, an hour northeast here of Columbus. Had a great experience there. Met a lot of great people. We actually have 8 people here on our team that went to school there. And so anything that we can do to provide support to those types of schools that are doing the right thing in our hearts, and that's something we want to provide for. And as I always say, I don't necessarily agree with everything our tax-paying dollars are used for, but if this is something I can benefit from and not necessarily have to pay any extra money, I think that's what I'd like to do. And one of the biggest reasons I don't like to overpay in taxes is because I'd rather see the money go where I want to go. So this is something that I feel personally that I can do that with. The 10th point I want to mention, and this is something that you won't be able to do, but something that was talked about, and that's with HSAs or health savings accounts. So one of my favorite investments, this is the trifecta. You can get tax-free when you put it in, tax deferred growth, tax free when you take it out. And sorry, not tax free up front, but tax deduction. You know what I meant. And so this is something that you can do, anyone can do. And they talked about raising the limits. They talked about more people could do this in the proposal of the One Big Beautiful Bill, but that's something that did not get passed. So we're just really educating people to understand that that's not going to get passed in case you heard something or thought that's true, or maybe you see something in the days ahead that's outdated. Just make sure you're aware that the current rules apply for that. You have to have a high deductible health insurance plan. You can't be on Medicare to contribute, and you can still use it for tax-free, as I mentioned. So still a great benefit. Just want you to be aware of how that works moving forward. Now, the next four I want to talk about are ones that you probably haven't heard before. So it could be interesting to know. Again, don't apply to everyone, but just good to have in your arsenal in case it does. So the first one is deductions for auto loans. And so you can deduct $10,000. This is through 2028, and you have to buy the car this year. And so you also have to have it assembled in the U.S. is one of the rules. And there's also an income phase out. So this is not meant for the wealthy is how they say it. And so if you have $100,000 if you're single, $200,000 if you're married filing jointly, anything above that is going to start to see a phase out here. And so this is something that just not a lot of people are going to see. I mean, if you get a 3 or 4% auto loan, if you have good credit and, have the money to put it, to make it work, you're probably not going to see that much interest to get up to that $10,000 limit. I mean, you'd have to buy at a 3% interest, you have to buy a $300,000 car to even get $10,000 of interest there. And then, depending on if you're under those income phase outs, well, you're probably going to be in the 10, 12, 22% bracket at most. And so, you're going to save some money, but it's only going to be a couple $1,000s at most is what this benefit looks like. So it's more of a one for talk in my mind. I don't think this is going to get used very often, but just one for you to know in case you're a car person and want to explore that further. The 12th option is for those who itemize. And so I'd actually say this is probably going to be one more important to our clients. So I probably should have put it a little up higher in the list, but there is a 0.5% of AGI floor. So not going to be a huge problem for the clients we deal with because their incomes aren't going to be millions of dollars plus. But I mean, if you had $1 million income and you have a 0.5% floor, that means that out of that amount of money, that's $5,000 that you aren't able to write off. So if you give $20,000 to charity, you can only write off $15,000 in an instance. But again, if you have $100,000, well, if that's your income, your floor, and that's going to be $500. And if you give $20,000, well, you're still going to be able to write off $19,500. So not a big deal. But just want to talk about how that works. That doesn't start until 2026. So if you are a higher income earner and you're $500,000 or more, as an example, maybe it does make more sense to do a bigger donor advised fund now to take advantage of that write-off and not have to worry about that as time goes. And then the 13th point that I want to make a note of is kind of goes hand in hand with what that looks like. And that's a limited deduction for the 37% bracket. So obviously we know that, again, not many people watching this video are in the 37% bracket. If you are the Midwestern millionaire or you are in the 2% club, you never made millions of dollars a year. You're working jobs of service. You're making your good income, salary, and this may not be one you have to worry about, but just want to point it out. And again, this is basically saying that your 37% bracket will turn into 35%, and then you won't be able to, when you itemize deductions, you won't be able to write that out the full benefit. So just want to make that clear. It starts in 2026. And then the 14th point is the estate and gift tax exemption. Kind of important because we knew that this was going to get reduced to potentially half, which was about $7 million, which could impact many of the people watching this. Most of our clients are between 1 to 10 million and, they're 50s and 60s. And so by the time they pass, they're going to have some significant wealth there that if they lower this estate tax limit can really cause them to pay a lot of money in taxes. How the estate tax works is basically anything over the limit that they have. The new limit's going to be $30 million for married couples, $15 million for single. Probably not going to apply to a lot of people watching these videos here. And so with that, that's only going to apply to actually 0.3% in case you're wondering the stat. And so with that, anything over that 30 million would be then taxed at up to 40% rate there, which can be pretty significant. If you go back in time, this is something I'm worried about. Maybe not necessarily in the next 5 or so years, because this is technically permanent, right? But if they change this back, I could see them making this less attractive. If you go back in time, this has been $1 million, just back in the early 2000s. Even in the 1990s, it was, I believe, $600,000. And so anything over, for example, that $1 million limit would have been a 40% tax. If you're sitting there with $5 million, $4 million at 40%, that's going to be a very hefty tax bill. And if you do the math on that, that's actually going to be about $1.6 million the government gets and not your kids. So there's a lot of planning that goes into for this. The good news for you all watching this, probably not any planning you're going to necessarily need to start now, but could make sense to start gifting some money. You've probably heard of that thought and strategy. You know, if you're going to leave your money to your kids to when you pass away anyways, maybe you start to see the benefit of it and see the joy that they get to have from it to make an impactful difference there. And so with that being said, that is 14 points of the one big beautiful bill that I think will be very important to you. And so if you have any other questions on this, put them down in the chat. We're going to respond to all the questions and make sure you get exactly what you want there and need there so that you can live that retirement that you dreamed of there. And so that's all I've got on today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement. Have a great day. See you on the next video.